In a statement, Prime Minister Modi said India stands with Iran in its hour of grief. Dan Murphy reports from the Middle East on the helicopter tragedy in Iran.
We've now learned that Iran has declared 5 days of national mourning after state media confirmed that President Raisi, his foreign minister and 7 others on board all died in Sunday's crash. Rescue teams, we also know, struggled to find and reach that wreckage in the mountains near the Azerbaijan border. An Iranian official also telling Reuters that when it was found, the chopper was completely burned in the crash. Now, we still don't know exactly what went wrong here, but bad weather, fog, low light, of course, the harsh terrain as well could all be contributing factors. Iran also has very old civilian and military aircraft due to US and European sanctions. So US intelligence officials believe this was an accident and there was no evidence of foul play. Also, fair to say, though, the timing is very significant, just given the soaring tensions that we've seen in the region since October 7 and the tit-for-tat escalation between Iran and Israel in recent months. I must stress, though, an Israeli official has also told Reuters, quote, "It wasn't us." So the question is, what happens next here? The Vice President, Mohammad Mokbar, will assume the presidency until an election can be called within the next 50 days. But the real power in Iran is with Ayatollah Khamenei. He's the supreme leader, so no major changes in domestic or foreign policy are expected. And that is neutral for risk assets like oil and gold that I know you've been monitoring over the course of the last hour. I think key to watch from here, Frank, is going to be any reaction from the Iranian proxies, of course, Hezbollah, the Houthis and Hamas, and of course, which countries come forward to express condolence and why. That's what we're looking out for now.
As Dan was pointing out, Iran's first Vice President Mohammad Mokbar will take interim charge. The Constitution of Iran mandates that fresh polls to elect a new president be held within 50 days. A council consisting of the first Vice President, the Speaker of Parliament and the head of the judiciary must arrange an election for a new president within a maximum period of 50 days. We're now joined by Talmiz Ahmed, former Indian ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Oman, UAE, and an expert on West Asia. Mr. Ahmed, give us a sense of whether this could lead to a political crisis in Iran.
This is a very tragic development for any country to lose 2 very senior officials in a tragic accident is both dramatic and tragic. At the same time, it will have relatively limited impact. As you know, the Iranian political order is dichotomous. You have an executive that is directly elected and a legislature that's directly elected, and you have the supreme leader. As per the Iranian constitution, full powers relating to national security, national interest, economic policy, all of these are vested in the supreme leader. In fact, the president of the country functions under the directions of the supreme leader. And hence, I think, while it is a tragic development, this will have relatively limited impact on Iranian affairs. I don't believe the country will experience a sense of crisis of the kind that would have that might have occurred in several other countries which would have faced such a tragedy themselves.
Right. Ambassador Ahmed, when we speak about President Raisi, since the 1980s, he had played a very critical role in Iran's politics. What was his importance? What was his contribution and certain controversies surrounding him as well?
President Raisi has a legal background and was Prosecutor General in the 1980s. You recall that the 1980s were a very traumatic period for Iran. Their revolution had just been a few months old when Iraq had launched an assault, a military assault on Iran. And this was, they were hoping at that time that Iran would be enfeebled because of the revolution and would be, therefore, the Iraqis would be able to capture a lot of territory. In the event that war had united the country and they were able to mobilize forces against the Iraqi attack. The war went on for 8 years. This was, as I said, a traumatic period because Iran suffered very heavy casualties. Out of 850,000 persons killed during this 8-year period, more than 500,000 were Iranians. The controversy associated with President Raisi is that he was a role player in the killing of a very large number of prisoners. What had happened is that a section of the Iranian opposition had participated with Iraq in the attack on their homeland. This is the Mujahideen-e-Khalq. Sections of the Mujahideen, members of the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, who were in Iranian prisons, were put to death because of the action taken by their co-members against the motherland. This is what has been held against President Raisi over a very long time. Going back to the literature of that period, the killing of these prisoners was approved by Ayatollah Khomeini, but it was also opposed by other distinguished Ayatollahs. So from that period till today, President Raisi was associated as being a hardliner, an uncompromising product of the Islamic Revolution, representing a hardline approach.
Right.
More recently, he was being mentioned as a serious candidate to succeed Supreme Leader Khamenei once the Supreme Leader had passed away.
Right. Very beautifully, you've summed up his contribution and controversies, Ambassador Ahmed. I'd also like to ask you, what next? The Vice President who takes over is only an interim president. What happens in the next 50 days? Who are the possible contenders for the post of president? And who could possibly succeed the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei?
Iran, alongside all of West Asia today, is in the throes of crisis. You have an ongoing mass murder taking place in Gaza, where the death toll has crossed 35,000 in just 7 months and all. But Iran has also put together the axis of resistance, which is the most viable and credible opposition to Israel. Recently, Israel attempted to provoke a larger conflict in the region by attacking the Iranian embassy in Damascus. Iran responded with a massive display of its own capacity and technology, which surprised the Israelis and the Americans. They did limited damage, but the intention of the Iranians was to make clear to the Israelis that they have capacity to inflict considerable destruction upon them. The Israelis responded in kind, and with just 3 drones made it clear that they too had the capacity to inflict considerable harm on Iran. This is where we are. As of now, Iran has affirmed a strategic parity as far as Israel is concerned. Now comes the domestic side. In the domestic side, when Raisi's name was being mentioned as a successor to the Supreme Leader, the other name mentioned was that of Ayatollah Khamenei's son, Mustafa. These are very, very early days. It is not clear whether Mujtaba is a credible candidate. We do not know much about his credentials. We do not know if his father has the capacity of seeing through his son's candidature. There will be a period of turmoil whenever you have such a dramatic turn of events and such tragic circumstances. It is not easy to take major decisions. There will be politicking behind the scenes. My own sense is that Iran has made it clear that its politics is not going to change fundamentally. The last elections that took place some months ago affirmed that the system led by the supreme leader and supported by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is going to uphold the values, the principles, and the interests of the revolution. Therefore, a very large number of so-called reformists were not allowed to stand in the revolution. And the National Assembly that has emerged, and more importantly, the Guardians Council that has emerged, which will select the supreme leader, both of them reflect the traditional, the conservative, and even the hardline approach within the
Right.
Iranian political order. Now,
So you're
whether
saying,
this means that Mustafa has an opportunity, that remains to be seen. But inherently, in terms of the character of the regime and of the state order, I don't think there will be a real change.
all right, hold that thought, Mr. Ahmed. We will have to slip into a short break here. When we return, we'll discuss more on the death of Iranian president and its repercussions for the Middle East and geopolitics. Welcome back. We are discussing the ramifications of the tragic death of Raisi. Former envoy Talmiz Ahmed is with us. Mr. Ahmed, as you said, the politics of Iran is not going to change, but there will be a period of turmoil. India recently renewed the Chabahar agreement for a period of 10 years. Any direct risks that you see for India? What are certain political cues we should be watching out for?
Iran is one of the most important countries in our neighborhood. Unfortunately, we have not given our relationship the content and substance that the relationship deserves. We have, for over the last 25 years, mortgaged this relationship to our ties with the United States. The United States has a certain problem with Iran, which has now become part of their domestic politics. This problem goes back to 1979. Not only that, Israel has also played a very major role in developing and sustaining an anti-Iran opinion within the American political establishment. So it is in this background that we have dealt with Iran. Up to 2003, we had affirmed a strategic partnership with Iran, which would have security, defense, political, and intelligence cooperation as at its heart. We were then offered Chabahar port and the connectivity that would go from Chabahar. So please recall, Chabahar has been discussed between India and Iran from 2001 when Vajpayee ji interacted with Iran, and then of course it was solidified in 2003. Unfortunately, from 2004, when we opened discussions relating to the nuclear agreement, we totally buried this relationship. And it remained buried until you had the JCPOA. It lasted for 2 years, and once again, at the altar of the Americans, we took no action on the relationship. Prime Minister Modi went to Iran in 2016, and had a tripartite meeting in Tehran, which involved the presidents of Iran and the president of Afghanistan. And we thought we would go forward robustly. But with Trump withdrawing from the JCPOA and again reaffirming sanctions, we have held back. Now, I would say to you that we have never conveyed seriously to the Americans that if they want to have a partnership with us, this partnership has to be based on mutual respect and an understanding of the interests of the other side. We should convey to the Americans, we live here. The Americans have the luxury of packing their bag and running as fast as they can when they have a debacle, as happened in the case of Afghanistan and the case of Iraq. We don't have that luxury. We belong here. We live here. We have very substantial strategic interests as far as Iran is concerned. Now, in a set of circumstances, India has once again reaffirmed its commitment to Chabahar, and there is a formal agreement that has been signed. It remains to be seen with what speed and commitment we are able to fulfill the terms of this agreement. We have made certain promises. Let us see. I am keeping an open mind on this, but a record with regard to sustaining this precious relationship is extremely poor, and that is the skepticism. Will this tragedy have any impact on this? Possibly not. I don't see any reason for any alarm bells in India. The relationship is substantial. It is commercially viable. It is important to both countries. I think it is more important for India. Because if you remember, from the time of partition till today, we have regretted that the consequences of partition have deprived us of a direct connection with Central Asia as well as with West Asia. The port of Chabahar and the connectivity multimodal projects from Chabahar were supposed to correct this geopolitical anomaly. We were to link directly with Afghanistan and with Central Asia. We have taken no action in this regard whatsoever. If you remember, I want to make one last point in this context. The Chabahar port project and the multimodal transport from there were offered to us in 2003. This is 10 years before Xi Jinping talked about the Belt and Road Initiative. If we had completed our project, it is Xi Jinping who would have sought cooperation from us so that he could integrate his East-West project with our South-North project. We have remained on the sidelines consistently, and therefore the space is occupied by several other players, not necessarily India's best friend.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed, for your time. And staying with the Middle East, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has sought arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the chief of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar. In a statement, the ICC prosecutor said there is reasonable grounds to believe the Hamas leadership and the Israeli leadership bear criminal responsibility for war crimes and crimes against humanity. In the statement, the prosecutor has named Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. The prosecutor has also named Hamas chief military commander Mohammad al-Masri and the political head of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh. Israel has reacted very strongly to the statement from the prosecutor. Moderate Israeli leader Benny Gantz has said, and I quote, "Placing the leaders of a country that went into battle to protect its citizens in the same line with bloodthirsty terrorists is moral blindness." End of quote. So Israel has indicated that they will not be accepting any kind of verdict to that effect. Currently, this is a statement from the prosecutor at the International Court of Justice. Let's see how the story unfolds in the days to come. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of News Center.